Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Bedford Museum's annual memorial service, where we honor those that have left us in the last year, be members, docents, friends, benefactors, and so forth. My name is Dee LeClaire, Vice President of the Volunteer Council, and this is Maureen McCarthy, the President of the Volunteer Council. So we're going to start out with welcoming our brand new President and CEO, Amanda McMullen, and she's going to start out by saying a few words.
And Maureen. Good afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here. And on behalf of the Museum Volunteer Council, as well as the museum's Board of Trustees, I am very pleased to welcome you to this remembrance service. It's always important for us to pause and remember all of those who have meant so much to us, and particularly as a membership organization, one that is truly lifted by the spirit of the community. Today is a deeply meaningful day. Thank you for joining us to honor our volunteers, our trustees, and our friends at the museum. Thank you.
Okay, Maureen and Mr. Robert Rocha, who's the Director of Education and Science Programs, will now do the invocation of names and the holding of the ship's bell.
Joseph Bedford, class of 2001. Sarah Brownell, class of 2002. Charles Cabral, class of 1995. Eugene Dragon, 1990. Annette Dwyer, 1995. Nelson Gifford, Museum Friend. Elizabeth Kugler, class of 1973. Cynthia Simmy McNaughton, volunteer class of 1990. George Monk Jr., Museum Trustee. Arthur Manise, Museum Friend. Louise Sawyer, class of 1987. Sally Taylor, Museum Friend. Roderick Turner, MD, Museum Friend.
Now I'm going to introduce Sarah Budlong. She is the Director of Development over at the museum, and she will now recognize longtime museum members.
Before we begin the remembrances, we wanted to take a moment to recognize some longtime museum members that have passed away, going back about the past 18 months, and some who have received memorial gifts in memory of this year. Dr. John Wolkowitz of Bedford, Charlotte H. Gray of Westport, Louise Dupree of New Bedford, Charles F. Denali of South Dartmouth, Annette Lantizis of Asheville, North Carolina, who is a descendant of Emily Bourne, and Elizabeth Thompson of East Booth Bay, Maine. Thank you.
At this time, we will remember our museum friends, trustees, and volunteers who have passed away this past year. Joseph Betancourt, class of 2001, will be remembered by Barbara Cosmich.
Good afternoon. Joe Betancourt was born and raised in Acushnet, and in 1957, when he was 23, he settled in Fairhaven, where he and his wife Helen raised 4 sons and two daughters. When Joe passed away, this past March 31st, he was 84 years old, and the family had grown to 14 grandchildren and 5 great-granddaughters. For 30 plus years, Joe worked as a production engineer at Alvarez Corporation. He also found time to be a Fairhaven Call firefighter, and he was the captain of engine number 4. Past president of the iconic Livesey Club in Fairhaven, they funded youth sports and very community-minded. By the way, they burned down 11 days ago. I was doing some research and I said, oh no. They're going to be good. He also participated in the 4th Old Dartmouth Militia in Fort Phoenix Garrison. And believe it or not, in the 1950s and 60s, as a young man, he played drums in a band, a local band called the Wanderers. What do you think, Bob? He used to rock it. And in 2001, Joe became a docent at the Railing Museum. On Monday mornings, he was captain of the forecastle. Listen up, he would command the kids, and it was usually a bunch of recalcitrant and distracted 5th graders. He would assign some kids to man the tack and clue lines, and others to hoist sail and fasten the lines to the belaying pins. Then came orders to work the windlass and sing shanties sometimes to lighten the load. But below decks is where Joe really warmed to the experience of a 3-year whaling voyage. In the dark, dank, and airless forecastle, there were rats the size of house cats. He was not a tall man, but his voice was very deep and resonant, and the kids were just totally transfixed. He totally controlled them. And he said, there was no reason after you finished eating to wash your beard with your face, because when you slept at night, there were little creatures that would come out at night and nibble at the crumbs. The food was nothing to write home about, he would say. You had to take the hardtack biscuits and knock them to get the weevils out. Of course, there were a lot of weevils inside, but he didn't mention that. And then before you soaked it in your salty stew. And then he would say to the kids, there were no bathrooms. They were horrified. How can you live for 3 years without a bathroom? What do you do? Well, he explained it to them. They were totally transfixed and grossed out, and what better way to entertain 5th graders than teach them history? But Joe, it was a pleasure knowing you, and wish you greasy luck.
Now, Sally Brownell, volunteer class of 2002, will be remembered by John Brinkley.
Good afternoon. I'll start by acknowledging an email that I got from a longtime friend of Sally's, Janet Sherwood, and she asked that she said was Sally was a loyal, imaginative friend. We shared memories and laughs going back to her teenage years. She and Larry were true and steady museum volunteers, not only as docents, but Sally spent hours going cross-eyed transcribing logbooks. This endeavor was the work of many volunteers, making a huge contribution to the museum's new database that will serve researchers for years to come. Thank you, Janet. But I would say if any of you have attended the museum's annual Moby Dick Marathon, you probably remember Sally as a reader. But if you don't remember her as a reader, she was the woman that knitted the whole 27 hours. 25 years ago, my wife and I were looking to relocate to the South Shore here, and the South Coast, I should say. And we quickly discovered there were no motels in the area. And we found the Salt Marsh B&B, which Sally and Larry ran in the retirement, quote, retirement. And the house hunting was going well. It took a lot of weekends, and we became very good friends over that time. And one thing that Sally was famous for was her breakfast. And her most inviting breakfast, or delicious breakfast, I should say, was her whole wheat pancakes. And we just had to have that recipe. And I got it, and we put it on a container that sits in our cupboard today. And we enjoy them constantly. But finally, we did buy a house, and it turned out it was just 5 doors south of the Salt Marsh Park. And one day we were having dinner with Sally and Larry, and Sally said, you know, the Whaling Museum has some wonderful volunteer opportunities. And I took advantage of it, and it was 15 years ago. But I would say that I am still thinking of Sally at least 2 to 3 times a week. That's every time I go through that cupboard.
Okay, next we have Tom Flynn, who will be remembering Charles DeBraw, volunteer class of 1995.
Charles and I did not share the same volunteer day. When I started in 1999, it was a big transition in this organization. We just had work that would get the skeleton from the Blue Whale. But Charles had spent virtually his whole life in New Bedford. He passed away at 85 years old. He was here with 2 exceptions. He served in the U.S. Army during the Korean conflict, and he attained his degree from Northeastern University in engineering. When he was president of the Volunteer Council from 2001 to 2003, a period I can tell you of great turmoil. He did a magnificent job. We shared experiences because we both spent our careers in the defense aerospace industry. We used to get together and share stories, particularly when he was president of the council. So, you would be amazed at what we're doing now with the United States Navy, because he served the Navy for 30 years at NUSC, which is the Naval Underwater Systems Center in Newport. And he's a very prominent engineer there. So Charlie's personality and his lifelong experience with New Bedford, plus his naval service, he was a very bright guy, soft-spoken, broad historical experience with oceans and local New Bedford history. I love chatting with him. I know he hadn't been around for about 5 years due to sickness, but he was an outstanding leader of this institution at a time when lots of turmoil in the beginning years of the 2000 period, and it seems like it hasn't stopped till today. This period of time. Rest in peace, Charles.
So now it is my honor to recognize Eugene Dragon, who was a volunteer class of 1990. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I can boom louder too. I didn't know Eugene, but from what I heard and what I read about him, he sounds like he was a very wonderful man. Eugene was born in 1929. He left us on October 5th of 2017. He was married for a very long time, 58 years, to the late Eugenia Jenny Dragon. He went by the name Gene, and she was Jen. Gene served in Korea while in the United States Army, and upon his return, he went to work as a salesman for Bunny Bread and later Nissan Bread Company in Bedford. He too had a 30-year career. Not many of us can say that, at least not in the same place. In his spare time, he played percussion for the Dartmouth Community Band and was quite talented as a musician and was named its president. Gene was a member of the choir at St. Anthony Church in Bedford also. He also found time to swim several times a week at the local YMCA. His passion for New Bedford's whaling history and tradition made him a very dedicated and knowledgeable docent. He was a member of the class of 1990, as I had mentioned. Those who knew him here at our museum family remember him fondly. His obituary reads in part, "Gene was a gregarious man, always with a smile and a warm sense of humor. He encouraged his 5 children to pursue their dreams." In trying to gather a little more information about Eugene, I spoke to a member of St. Anthony's Church, the choir, while I was trying to gather some personal thoughts on him. They thanked him very much for his service there. They spoke very highly of him and missed him when he was no longer part of the choir. So to the family of Gene Dragon, we thank you for sharing him with us. Now we have Annette Dwyer, who will be remembered by Debbie Flynn. She was class of 1995.
There are few people in life who put a smile on their face when they walk into a room. Annette Dwyer was one such person. Annette was a classy lady. She was stylish, charming, and kind. Thursday mornings were made brighter when Annette would join us in the volunteer room. As Annette and I walked through the museum together, I enjoyed listening to her stories of how she met her husband, of her working with him at his funeral home, and of her pride in raising 3 children to become successful adults. 5 years ago, Annette left New Bedford and moved to Connecticut to be closer to her children. We Thursday docents felt her absence. I feel that even now, when her friends and families think of her, a smile spreads across their faces. What better legacy than that could anyone leave?
Now, Mr. Nelson S. Gifford, who is the museum friend, will be remembered by Donald S. Rice.
Well, this is a great privilege and honor for me to give this remembrance and tribute to Nelson S. Gifford, a dear friend of the Whaling Museum and a number of people in this room. I could go on and on about Nelson's accomplishments. As a Tufts graduate, a U.S. naval officer during the Korean War, his incredible 4 decades long career at Denison Manufacturing culminating in his being chairman and CEO, in his leadership in philanthropy, targeting education, healthcare, and the arts. Nelson Gifford's name and reputation has been prominent with many charities, including the Whaling Museum, the Boy Scouts of America, the New Bedford Symphony, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the United Way, the American Red Cross, Newton Wellesley Hospital, Toby Hospital, and Dana-Farber Cancer Research, to name a few. But what made all these accomplishments possible, lasting, and memorable was Nelson's thoughtful and innovative approach, his steadfast and honorable principles, and his empathic, considerate, generous, and loving demeanor. And like the prior tribute, Nelson could make people smile. I have the happiest memories of Nelson at Whaling Museum and other events with his infectious smile, his positive energy, his enthusiasm, his joie de vivre. As a wonderful and faithful friend and a longtime member and supporter of the Whaling Museum in many, many ways over many years, Nelson Gifford will be deeply missed by all of us.
Susan Barnett will now remember Elizabeth Kugler, volunteer class of 1973.
I became acquainted with Betty Kugler a long time ago, in the 1970s actually, when our daughters were classmates in elementary school, and Betty and I bonded through PTA and school activities. I was fairly new to New Bedford, and I and I remember her going out of her way to make sure the girls and I felt welcome. I learned quickly that Betty was a very kind and giving person, devoted to education and above all to hands-on parenting. I learned too that Betty's husband Richard was director of the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and that in 1973, Betty became one of the 8 founding members of our present volunteer council. At a luncheon held in their honor a few years ago, Betty spoke of how proud they were of the way their small outreach group grew to be the wonderful organization it is today, with members numbering over 100. Betty was a woman with many responsibilities. She was mother to 4 children, a tremendous help and support to her husband, and a brilliant woman in her own right. She was a writer, an artist, a musician, and a scholar. She was dedicated to books, to culture, to public affairs, and to nature. She had a sharp mind and was always meticulous in what she said and did. She was a solid, serious woman and will be missed by all who knew her.
Okay, Mark Krochnick, who now remember Cynthia McNaughton, volunteer class of 1990.
Good afternoon. So I started here at the museum about 8 years ago as an intern, but Cindy predated my arrival by quite a bit, 20 years actually, so I consider that quite a bit. In fact, I remember the first conversation the 2 of us ever had. I had just been hired on staff, and I was sitting at my desk in the reading room, and she was standing to my left, and she was talking to me about this property line that she was doing research on for a neighboring town, and she realized it altered over time and she didn't know why. And she explained to me that one day she discovered through research that it was altered because a set of railroad tracks went through. And that was the reason. And that was the conversation. I said, great, that was pretty cool. What I didn't know at the time is that one particular conversation would set the stage for me in terms of what Cindy brought to the table in more ways than I could have possibly imagined. But I'm not here today to blather on because I have a hunch that's the last thing she would have wanted. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Cindy, and not just what she meant for the museum, but what she did, especially for the library. She was never shy about tackling new projects or taking on old ones. And speaking as somebody who's very much motivated by seeing multiple projects through to completion, I always found that drive very admirable. And I always felt she embodied the true spirit of what it meant to be a volunteer, because she volunteered not just to give back to the community, and by sharing her knowledge and furthering the museum's mission. And she did that every day she came into the library. Now I know in the back of her mind, or sometimes in front of her mind, she wanted to see all these projects complete. I know this because she reminded me of it every single day that I saw her. I gotta finish this project, I gotta finish. I said, yep, absolutely. I hear you loud and clear. She was really working on in the last few times she was volunteering is this one project. There's this quilt in our collection, and there are names on it. And the question, of course, is who are these people? Who are these names? And she was doing genealogical research on who these people were. And she really wanted to finish this. But the part she conveniently leaves out is that her current research sits at 21 pages of notes that are meticulously researched by her. But she considers it unfinished. Look, 21 pages? I'd call that done. I would call it done in, 5 pages, but that's fine. But that wasn't the only project she worked on. The list of her projects is ridiculously long. We don't have all day. I just want to highlight a few. Just looking at what she accomplished, she indexed church records. It was the very first project she worked on when she first started. That's what she told me got her into the library in the first place. She wanted to index those church records. She thought they were very interesting. All kinds of great information. I still use that index on a daily basis, by the way. She compiled notes on the Fairhaven Bridge and its construction. She did genealogical research on Albert Bierstadt, along with really thick research file. Really great. She made corrections to our reference sources on family histories. She indexed deeds from our collection, and she added to the index Henry Ward's book on Old Bible Houses, which is, in my opinion, one of the best works ever produced on local history of the region. So what I'm telling you is that Cindy made it better. I didn't know it was possible, but she did. So all of her completed projects, they leave a permanent and lasting imprint on the library. Even her unfinished one, that's 21 pages long, that's still going to leave a lasting and permanent imprint on the library. I do have one story that happened a few months ago. I had an intern who I wanted to get working on an inventory of this one particular collection of family papers. Didn't have an inventory. There was nothing online. No one other than me, maybe two other people knew the collection existed. So we're going to inventory it, going to get it online. Everyone's going to know it's there, open access. That's the name of the game. I opened the box to show the intern what to do, and there was a handwritten inventory of everything in there. And I looked at the handwriting. I said, Cindy did it. She beat me to the punch. She beat me to the punch. And little things like that, just kind of little reminders that, yep, Cindy was here. And I'm going to keep discovering those. And I'm happy that I am, because I know that inventory was perfect. And unless the perfect's not cool, that was perfect. So I'm going to finish up by saying a few things about how she and I will conclude our conversations. I can picture the setting in my head perfectly. It'll be a Friday evening at the Purchase Street Library. That's where she's involved with volunteering. And she'd be ready to leave after a full afternoon volunteering. Friday evening, the two of us would always have a brief conversation. I mean, sometimes they were briefer than others, but it was a brief conversation. And right before she walked out the door, she always said, onward. That was the way she always said it. So, in honor of Cindy, onward. Thank you.
Mr. George B. Mark Jr., Museum Trustee, will be remembered by George B. Mark III.
My father was an intensely curious man and a longtime student of history. These facts certainly influenced his commitment to serving as a trustee of the Whaley Museum from 1980 to 1987. Not to mention the fact that our family business, then called William F. Nye Incorporated, is so intimately tied to local history. In particular, he admired the scholarship of Richard Hoover and enjoyed the fresh historical perspective he brought to the museum. He certainly sympathized with Dick's dilemma. How do we make a dark and inviting place more appealing to the local community? In that sense, I think my father was present at the creation. Dick began the long process of renewal, continued by Anne Bringle, and brought to great fruition under James Russell. Dad spoke of the vital importance to New Bedford and the community of knowing its entire history, including and well beyond Whaley. And it was clear that this would require a lot of money. Fundraising required balancing the interests in those days of the old guard who had the money with a younger, energetic, and multicultural group who, at least in those days, did not. Thus began 30 years of hard work by staff and boards combined to achieve the vibrant institution that we are all enjoying and working with today. Seeing the fruits of this labor brings to mind words my father spoke in 2004. This was upon his receipt of the Sidney Adams Award from the Interchurch Council. Dad would have said much the same as a message to all of us who dedicate so much time to this institution. I quote, "For 50 years over much of my working life, I have been in business, either technical or commercial. I lived at an unremitting pace. The pressures, the tensions, and stresses of the business world made me wonder more than once if I were not just too busy to have a spiritual life. Getting and spending led me out of the usual paths of grace. So being involved in the Interchurch Council, however, has shown me that I was making some unnecessary assumptions. And I think that speaks for all of us here today at the Whaley Museum. But in terms of the Interchurch Council, being part of it, as he said, has meant working together with a talented group of individuals who are committed to Christ in their lives and in their work. I have seen God's grace in action, Yet the presence of God's grace does not preclude hard work, stress, or pressure. Rather, grace transforms these inevitable aspects of being human and makes stress and tension easier to bear and more productive of success in ministry. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Powell Cruz will now read for Arthur Ruiz, who is a museum trustee.
It is an honor for me to say a few words about Arthur. We were all saddened when Arthur passed on February 21st after a courageous year-long battle with cancer. He will be remembered as a quiet, gentle, humble, and generous man. Arthur was a prolific artist who leaves behind an extensive body of work. His paintings depict some of this area's iconic whaling and maritime images. One of Arthur's favorite paintings was Mending the Nets, which has been traveling as a part of the National Exhibition of the American Society of Marine Artists. It's traveling all over the United States and the world, including Japan. In describing this painting, he said, quote, "My style of painting is a combination of graphite drawing with transparent watercolor washes over a highly detailed rendering, creating images that are soft and subtle, yet resonating remarkable details and textures," unquote. I think we can all agree when viewing Arthur's painting, one walks away saying they are so detailed, aesthetically beautiful, and that he has captured the essence of the subject. Arthur and his wife Cheryl, of over 50 years, have so generously contributed his works to raise money for so many worthy causes in our community. One of their favorite causes was the Neediest Family Fund during the holidays. I would be remiss if I didn't say something about one of New Bedford's magical evenings in June of 2014, the Charles W. Morgan Homecoming Gala held on the State Pier. I was one of the attendees to this once-in-a-lifetime sold-out event sponsored by the Whaling Museum. Arthur was commissioned to paint the iconic logo of the Charles W. Morgan Return to New Bedford 2014, the 38th voyage. The watercolor titled Charles W. Morgan New Bedford Homecoming would be auctioned at the end of the evening to help defray the cost for the Morgan Homecoming events. An anonymous bidder left a $4,000 starting bid. The bid was rigorous. I remember feeling like I was on a Nantucket sleigh ride after the bid climbed to $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 between two bidders, and then the final bid, a new bidder entered for $50,000, which got the crowd to a standing ovation. I remember everybody was so happy for Arthur, who was simply speechless and overwhelmed. A fitting tribute to the humble man who now leaves a legacy and body of work for generations to enjoy. Before closing, let me say these words by Arthur regarding painting. Quote, "I try to convey a feeling of quiet and calm in a world of noise and fast pace. A peacefulness that comes from being alone but not lonely. I like structures which seem to stand with dignity the test of time. The textures of old wood, the bark of trees, rocks and such," unquote. Only a painting by Arthur is like having a friend close by. Arthur now joins the ranks of some of New Bedford's finest marine artists, Charles Henry Gifted, R. Swain Gifted, and Clifford Warren Ashton.
Judith Lund will now speak regarding Louise Sawyer, who is a volunteer class of 1987.
I knew Louise Sawyer for a long time because I joined her church nearly 50 years ago. Louise was a consummate lady. She was a quiet lady and very confident.
She graduated from New Bedford High School and entered Smith College. After college, she went to Puerto Rico for graduate studies to improve her Spanish, but she lost interest in that program because the dorm mother that she was in the dorm she was living in Puerto Rico would not allow them to go out on a date without a chaperone. So she came back and got a job in government. She met her husband, and after her husband returned from Europe, they moved to Sao Paulo, Brazil, where she engaged in learning Portuguese, which finally added to her list of languages that included Spanish, French, and Latin. She and her husband parted company, and she came back to New Bedford to live with her mother and raise her 2 children. She first worked at the YWCA and then took courses in social work. She was hired by the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children to investigate cases of child abuse. At the same time, she continued to work at the Y as a volunteer and served on their board of directors and president. She founded, with others, the Memorial Society of Southeastern Massachusetts. She was on the Community Health Improvement Council of Greater Taunton. She served our church in various capacities. She was a walking tour guide, and she was a volunteer here at the Whaling Museum for 21 years. She read logbooks regularly, carefully, and we were all very grateful for the work that she did. In 2008, she suffered a stroke. She had worked as a volunteer up to that time, but the stroke really incapacitated her, and she didn't leave the house much after that. So most of you who are here probably don't remember her, but those of us who use the logbooks and read her notes are very grateful for all she did for all of us who are interested in whaling history.
Okay, now we have Sally C. Taylor, who is a museum friend, which will be honored by Barbara Mulville. And then following that, Barbara will also read regarding Roderick H. Turner, MD, who was a museum friend.
Sally Taylor, I'm going to tell her this. Sally Taylor passed away in January. She was walking her beloved dog Sammy, a Westie, when she fell and hit her head and never regained consciousness. Sally was a petite and pixie-like woman who had a big voice, a hearty laugh, and usually a twinkle in her eyes. The widow of former Boston Globe owner and publisher William C. Taylor II. She split her time between Boston and Round Hill and Durham, but increasingly after Bill's death, Round Hill became the place she enjoyed most. I knew Bill pretty well during my career in Boston, but I didn't meet Sally until I moved down here. We became best friends. Sally grew up in Pennsylvania and Connecticut, then went to Radcliffe. She worked as an assistant to Nelson Rockefeller when he was governor of New York. When eventually she decided it was time to move on with her career, no one else was able to do her job. And Albany had to hire a bunch of people to replace her. Sally had a big brain, a steel trap memory, and her wit was assertive. She could cut to a crux of something or someone in one stroke, but always with great humor and never at anyone's expense. A former writer and book reviewer for the Globe, she was a voracious reader, recycling all the bestsellers of the Dartmouth Library and occasionally to friends. Always up on current news and events, she read the Globe and the New York Times every day. She frequently used to comment on how much better the Globe was than the Times. All that is, until the Times bought the Globe. After which she commented on the declining editorial quality of both papers. But she continued to read them. cover to cover, and never left any blanks in any of the crossword puzzles. She was a regular communication with family and friends. She proudly texted the latest photos of her sons and their families, including pictures of their dogs, ducks, sheep, and other family members. If she couldn't participate in an occasion, including many of the events of the wedding, she couldn't wait to hear about it, and she loved a bit of gossip. Sally kept everyone supplied with special blends of homemade seasonings. She brought jars of jelly to relish in sickness and in health. She remembered birthdays, and she delivered a toy for the dog at holidays. Even in times of serious health challenges and personal tragedies, her concern was always for others. She and Bill were generous donors to most of the South Coast, including the donation of a William Bradford painting to the Whaling Museum. Sally continued the philanthropic tradition, although as was typical for her, she asked for most of her contributions to be anonymous. Shortly before her death, she was honored for just shy of 32,000 hours of volunteer service at Mass General Hospital. By far, her longest serving volunteer. She came from a Philadelphia dynasty and married into a Boston dynasty, but Sally Taylor was as down-to-earth as you could get. Although small in physical stature, she had a heart as big as the blue whales. So, Dr. Roderick Turner grew up in Ohio. He went to Indiana University, he did a medical residency at Walter Reed, and came to Massachusetts to do his orthopedic residency and fellowship at MGH. He then moved with his mentor, Dr. Otto Frank, to New England Baptist Hospital, where they set up one of the first joint and limb specialized orthopedic surgical practices. People came to the Baptist from all over, and many of them came only because of Rod Turner. Besides being one of the pioneers in hip and knee replacement, Rod became the first expert in hip revision. People who had surgery elsewhere that had failed, people with problems since birth, people who had been told their cases were hopeless. Rod fixed them all. And he fixed some things he shouldn't have had to fix. But he never criticized anyone else's work or assessment. Rod was simply there for the patients. Although Rod was the principal designer and developer of what became known as the Baptist hip, he gave away most of the credit, as well as most of the royalties. His modesty, combined with his desire to make medicine better and share what he knew, endeared him to our colleagues and students. In addition to teaching his own techniques to anyone who wanted to learn, he listened and observed and was always open to other ideas. An orthopedic fellowship at the Baptist Hospital was probably the most prestigious orthopedic fellowship in the world at the time, drawing hundreds of applicants, and Rod was one of the principal reasons that was so. I met Rod when I worked at the Baptist. He looked like Papa Henry, and was often described as a man's man. Rod chaired the physicians division of the capital campaign I ran. And all of the New England Baptist doctors had given generously to the campaign, except one. So I asked Rod if he could help us get a significant gift from this physician. No problem, I'll handle it. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 5. So we were in Rod's office, and shortly after 5 a.m., the physician walked in. He greeted us, turned to Rod, and said, "What's up?" Rod looked at him, Rod looked at me, and then said, "Barbara has something she wants to ask you." That was Rod. He knew how to bring out the best in anyone. Rod retired and moved to the South Coast. When I moved here a short while later, he and Sandy were the very first people to welcome me. Although Rod was well known for his innovative skills as a surgeon, many people were not aware of his passion for our whaling heritage. He was a long-time Whaling Museum supporter who
loved the beauty and history of old Dartmouth, Buzzards Bay, and the islands. And he loved sharing that passion with his family. He loved fishing and drinking beer while fishing. And he collected fine marine paintings and rare scrimshaw over the many years. He donated several fine paintings to the New England Baptist Hospital. And he left to the Bedford Whaling Museum a 7-figure legacy. He and Sandy started spending winters in Florida. Eventually they moved to Florida full-time. But Rod remained loyal to the Red Sox and the Patriots, and he will always remain a hero to his proteges, his patients, his family, and our movement.
At this time, I would just like to say, wow, what a legacy these people have left us. And although many of us didn't know many of them, it's still nice hearing about them and knowing what a great organization that we are all part of. Before we get into this next number here, I'd like to give some recognition to our musicians, Polly Gardner, Woody Underwood, Ransom Griffin, and Barbara Snow, to our members.
We have Doc Murdoch here.
Doc Murdoch.
And Gordon Snow.
Oh, Gordon Snow, okay, thank you for clarifying that. I thought I had made these corrections, but, okay, so they are part of the Spindle City River Rats.
Spindle Rock River Rats.
And they've honored us with their presence for several years. And they're going to do a remembrance song right now, Let the Lower Lights Be Burning. Thank
some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save. Some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save.
Thank you. I had prepared closing remarks, but I'm going to scrap them after all those beautiful words. Allow me to wax poetic for just a second, indulge me for a moment, but as everyone was speaking individually and sharing such beautiful, loving words from your heart about these important members of our community, and each individual contribution so significant and great, I could not help but be staring at this beautiful arrangement. And the thought that came to me around each one of these beautiful individual, independent sentiments, when you hear them in totality, what a stunning arrangement you've put forth today. So thank you, each of you, for sharing your heart, sharing your soul, and sharing your words about these important members of our community. Thank you. With that, we are off in a few moments to our annual meeting, which is open obviously to all of members. So at 3 o'clock, we'd love for you to join us over in the Harbor View Gallery. But thank you so much for being here today.